Private Ned Gillen, October 6, 1918. Dear Jinx, took a piece of shrapnel in the arm yesterday. Didn't even see it coming, but it was just a scratch. So not to worry, today was a good day. Whenever we quit running or fighting long enough to look around, France turns out to be a beautiful place. Seems like all we've been sightseeing lately is our own muddy green uniforms. So the bright fall leaves are like a colorful kaleidoscope. Stopped for a spell today on the roadside. A group of fresh replacements sauntered past. Talk about colors. They were greener than green. Jaunty, clean-cut fellows, walking like they had someplace to be. Heck, Holler and me sat there, all of us thinking those boys reminded us of someone. Could it be someone from home? Was there still such a place? Then we realized it was us, back in June. Did we ever look like that, I asked. Heck answered, yeah, when we were in 6th grade. Then, true to his name, Holler yelled out, "What's your hurry, ladies? The senior promenade was last week." In a bygone day, we'd have laughed one of those laughs that kept us going after you forgot what was so funny. But that doesn't happen anymore. We've been on a 2-day hike and have had the good fortune to come across trenches already dug. You can tell a lot about a man by the trench he digs for himself. Some are shallow and clumpy, others are well dug and roomy enough for two. Kind of feels like sleeping in someone else's bed for a spell, but I always feel a debt of gratitude to whoever dug it. Funny thing, it also makes me take a little extra care when I dig one, so it might be a place of respite for the next guy to come along. I'm reminded of a line in a book I read in high school. It's not down in any map. True places never are. I can guarantee you. Those foxholes won't be found on any map after the war is over. But for now, my home is wherever me and my buddies lay our heads at night, and where we pray to God we'll wake up in the morning. There's been some talk of peace, armistice they call it. Hope is something most of us have been none too familiar with lately. Some men try to fight it off like a bad cold. Others let it wrap around them like a blanket. Me, it creeps quietly into my dreams and looks like Pop and you and home. Viva la nuit. Long live the night. Ned. The Shadow of Death, August 23, 1936. Miss Sadie stared ahead. This time she lingered in the story long after she told it, as if she was looking for a different ending. Even though she had not told me to go, I stood and started out the door. Then turning back, I took the compass from the hook on which it had hung all summer. My work here was finished. I felt like we had done enough. I can't say I knew where I was heading when I stepped off her porch and walked down the path to perdition. I knew when I got to the end of the path that there was no place else for me to go. I wandered around a little, but eventually found the tombstone I'd come across that day Letty, Ruth Ann, and I had been frog hunting. The one all by itself in the clearing, near an old craggy sycamore tree. I studied the letters on the tombstone, letting them tell me their story, letting them help me make sense of something that made no sense. The letter spelled out my father's name, Gideon Tucker. That was my father, the boy, Jinx. They were the one and the same. I'd wondered about and hoped for all along. Sitting down, my back against the tombstone, I took the compass from my pocket and opened the latch. Inside were the words I'd mistaken for the compass maker's name. Now I knew them for what they were. St. Dizier, October 8, 1918. This was Ned's compass, on which Gideon had engraved Ned's date of death and place of burial, because for my father, that was the day he began his wanderings in the valley of the shadow of death. I sat mourning the loss of Ned, a young soldier at arms, grieving the death of a town, wishing for my father who was still wandering. My tears had been falling for some time when Shady came for me. He stood beside me, stroking my hair. He thought it was his fault, didn't he, Shady? Because he helped Ned raise the $25 to join the army, underage. And then Ned was killed because he thought he was a jinx. I suppose. So what happened that night after the telegram came about Ned? Shady sat down beside me. He left and never came back. With Ned gone, I suppose he'd felt he'd done the one thing the town couldn't forgive him for. We didn't blame him. No, sir, there was nothing to forgive him for. The problem was we couldn't forgive ourselves. For what? For not being able to live up to what we had conceived of ourselves. That there was something special about Manifest. That we could overcome our past and start over. What about the spring water, the metal ore in the ground? Some of us started believing in our own tale that it might be healing water, hollowed ground, but it was just water and dirt, plain and simple. But the elixir, it saved lives. It helped people feel better for a while, until the worst wave of the influenza hit just a few weeks later, the deadly one. Then it was beyond what any elixir could cure. I let his words sink in, then stood up. Show me. Shady took my hand and walked no more than 20 feet from where we'd been sitting. Pushing aside a few branches, he made an opening in a row of bushes. And there they were, dozens of tombstones surrounded by dense shrubs and weeds. Bodies set apart from the town cemetery because of the deadly disease that had killed them. This was no man's land. I walked from stone to stone, feeling the loss of each person. Judge Carlson, Castillo Manipatopoulos, Mama Santonio, little Eva Cybulski. It seemed no family had been left untouched. Donald McGregor and Greta Ackerson, and Margaret Evans, senior class president, class of 1918. Shady said she had been the first to die of the influenza in Manifest. All died in November of 1918. Then the name that was probably the hardest of all to believe, Miss Eldora Larkin. In my mind, she had been so vigorous, so staunch, that surely if death was to approach her, she would give it a good tongue lashing and then send it on its way. But as Miss Sadie had said, things are not always what they seem. It was clear death had come to Manifest and would not be brushed aside. I felt Shady pull away. Come along, Miss Eveline. You've seen enough. Let's go home. The word struck me as odd. Home. That was a word I didn't know the meaning of. I think I'd like some coffee. Strong coffee. Shady understood. He took me along the railroad tracks to the bend by the woods. Back to the jungle where those faces were familiar to me. People lost and wondering like Gideon, like me. I sat at the fire and received nods of welcome from the men camped there for the night. Shady handed me a tin cup. The hot coffee scalded me as I sipped. No wonder Gideon had started closing in on himself. Looking back, I thought it started not when I had been cut, but when I turned 12. I was growing up, and he was probably already worrying about the road being a poor place for raising a young lady. Then, when the accident happened and I got so sick, the world came crashing down around him. He thought he was still a jinx, and one way or another, my life could not be good with him. When I'd cut my leg that day, I'd said the same thing